breaking in on Russ's time for just a few moments here today to welcome a Grammy Award-winning alto sax player, and that is the one and only Jim Snidero here to WMKV. And Jim, thank you for taking a few moments with us on a very busy schedule, I'm sure, because you're headed to Cincinnati soon.
I am, George, and thanks for taking the time to do the interview. I'm super excited about this performance. In fact, the strings performance that we're going to do on Sunday at the church is the first time that it's been performed in the United States in 20 years. The record was reissued in 2021, and now the music has actually been just published by a music publisher, and so this is kind of the maiden voyage.
And Cincinnati gets to be the landmark performance of this in a long time.
That's right.
We're talking about the Jazz at First series, Jim Snidero and Strings. It's the 12-piece orchestra called String Source. And the Phil DeGreg Trio will be there as well. You know, whenever we do anything with the Jazz at First at the First Unitarian Church on Linton Street, you know Phil DeGreg and his trio will be there as well. String Source's 12-piece string orchestra. And, of course, Jim Snidero on the alto sax. It's the Jazz at First series called Snidero and Strings, and it's coming up this Sunday, November 19th at 2 p.m. at the First Unitarian Church. Jim, I know this goes back a ways, but what are some of the challenges of performing with a string section and the arrangement of something like that versus dealing with maybe just a trio?
Well, first off, you have to have the proper acoustics because string players generally, it's not like a projecting saxophone or drums or something like that. So you need a pretty vibrant space, and the church is a perfect location in there. The acoustics are perfect for strings, and it's my understanding that some of the events held that the Cincinnati Orchestra hold that for smaller groups are in this church. It's perfect. Also, just to find the proper string players that can interpret the music correctly and bring their personality into it. We've been careful about that, and I think that the string section is going to be outstanding.
And, of course, there's still room for improvisation to a certain extent, I take it?
Oh, yeah, every song has sections for improvisation. We're doing a suite of mine I wrote for the Hudson River, which is a 3-part suite, and there's soloing throughout that, and then we're doing 3 other original compositions and 2 standards. And I should mention that there is some historical relevance to this recording because, and as a matter of fact, if anybody wants to see a documentary about it, they can go to my website, jimsnidero.com, and there's a short documentary on making of the strings record. But we were scheduled to record in New York on September 11th, 2001.
Oh, my.
And we were on our way to the studio when the terrible attacks happened. So we regrouped and we recorded a couple of months later, and exactly 20 years after that is when the reissue of the recording came out on Savant Records.
And if you're just joining us here on this special interview, we have a wonderful guest. That's Jim Snidero, Grammy Award-winning alto sax player, and he's going to actually be making a couple of appearances in Cincinnati. I'm going to give the main one first that we're talking about, and that is coming up this Sunday, November 19th at 2 p.m., the beautiful acoustic space, the First Unitarian Church on Linton Street. It's going to be Jim performing with the Phil DeGreg Trio, and that already guarantees an incredible musical performance there with Jim and the trio, but also String Source's 12-piece orchestra. That's some of Cincinnati's top string musicians who are going to be playing. And this is just beautiful. Acoustically, you want to check this out. And you can get tickets at cincinnatijazz.org. That's the Cincinnati Contemporary Jazz Orchestra website. So when you go there, even though this is Jazz at First, you can get your tickets at cincinnatijazz.org. The Jazz at First series happens at the First Unitarian Church on Linton Street. Now, I am going to mention another appearance. Before that, on Thursday, November 16th, Jim Snidero is going to be appearing at the Redmore with the Cincinnati Contemporary Jazz Orchestra and the opening act, Central State University's Jazz Ensemble. And that's going to be a wonderful program as well. And Jim, have you played the Redmore before?
I have not, but I'm hearing that it's great.
Beautifully intimate. Both of these places are incredibly intimate, kind of a different vibe for each place. But on Thursday, November 16th at 7 p.m., the Redmore, Jim Snidero, alto sax, along with the Cincinnati Contemporary Jazz Orchestra. And then, of course, the one we're mainly talking about here, because this is a monumental recreation, if you will, Jazz at First, Snidero and Strings. And that is, of course, Jim Snidero, along with the Phil DeGreg Trio and String Source's 12-piece orchestra. Jim, let's talk a little bit about the acoustics. Phil has talked glowingly about this space. I know that many of the performances in there have been without microphone, and I believe that Eric Leckleiter, the CCJO artistic director, will be conducting the string musicians as well. Is it exciting for you to come to a brand new location, and are there challenges of kind of learning the ambiance of a new location?
Oh, I'm super excited about it. Whenever I get a chance to play with strings, it's special because for us as jazz musicians, it's really pretty rare to play with strings. Sure. It's actually, I guess, kind of an exotic experience. And ever since Charlie Parker's famous record with strings back in the 50s came out, saxophone players always dream about working with string players. But I did my project a little bit differently because I decided that I wanted to arrange all the music, and I composed most of the music too. There are very few recordings where the artist himself composes and arranges for the orchestra, but I really was passionate about it. I spent about a year of time working on the music, and we've just gotten tremendous reviews over the years. It's considered one of the best in the genre, and in the end, it's the record that I'm most proud of.
That is high praise right there, because you have had some tremendous things on the High Note Savant label and before, and you're sharing it with a very intimate audience on November the 19th. That's a Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock at First Unitarian Church. Again, tickets at cincinnatijazz.org. That's cincinnatijazz.org. And we have Jim Snidero here with us. And Jim, can you give us maybe a few other examples of what might be played on Sunday, November 19th?
We're playing two beautiful standards that aren't performed very often. The first one is called It's the Talk of the Town, and it's actually quite old. And it's a beautiful song. I guess it was written in the 20s, maybe, 1920s, over 100 years ago. And then we're doing a song by a jazz musician called Theme for Ernie, which John Coltrane made popular. And there's a beautiful treatment with it. There's some interaction with the saxophone on It's the Talk of the Town, just saxophone and strings. And then we're doing, as I mentioned, my suite. It's called River Suite, and there are three movements. One is Dawn, which kind of invokes the waking up of the activities on the Hudson. And then On the Bank, which is more about the daily. There's so many barges and sailboats and even guys on wave runners and military boats and fishermen and all kinds of things going up and down the river. So I tried to invoke that on this piece, On the Bank. And then the last one's called Torrent, and it's about when we have these serious and even more serious now storms in New York, what it's like to see the chaos on the river. Actually, it's a huge river, by the way. It's down here in New York. I guess it's a couple miles wide. I live in Midtown Manhattan, and I can walk over to the river bank, and that's quite a ways over to New Jersey on the other side. So that's what that one's about. And then I've got a piece that I've written in memory of some lost relatives, people that have passed. And then a couple of other things, too, that are just showing off the string orchestra. One thing that I tried to do with the writing in this recording, and a lot of people have commented on it, critics, is that I really tried to integrate the strings into the music and not just kind of beautiful clouds of chords over top, but digging into the arrangements with us and interacting. Yes. And that's why it's very important to get the right string players, too, because they have to feel comfortable with the rhythm section and playing this kind of music. I think that's what, for me, makes the recording special, is the connectivity between the strings and the rhythm section and myself.
It kind of reminds me a little bit of Brubeck's Requiem, where you've got a rhythm section, you've got an orchestra, you've got all kinds of things going on, a chorus. You won't have a chorus, but integrating the quartet, basically, you and the trio along with the string section, that had to be incredible to weave all that together. And when people hear a lot about strings, many casual music listeners will just say, oh, okay, that's classical type music. So many of our interviews here have been classically trained. Were you classically trained, and did that help having the string section integrated in your arrangement?
Absolutely. I mean, I grew up as a classical saxophone player before I went to college. I would go to competitions and played some pretty hard material for saxophone and piano, for example. And, of course, I studied at college. I studied all kinds of arranging and composing techniques. And then when I got to New York, I really lived in New York for a long time. I was able to take lessons with some great arrangers, and they pointed me in the right direction as to what recordings I should listen to and some things that I should think about, techniques I should think about. And I spent a year working on the music. So I was very serious about it, and it came out on a great label, Milestone, which was a major label. It's been integrated into another company now. And then 2 or 3 years ago, it was reissued by the current label I'm with, Savant. It's really special. We will have the recording there, and it's been remastered. It just sounds spectacular, really. So very happy that this is all coming together now.
So you can take Jim Snidero and the strings home with you, actually, if you like.
Not literally.
No, not literally. That'd be a little difficult, but
yeah. Pack the string orchestra and myself into a church van, and we go with you.
It'd be like those clown cars that you say have in a circus, where how many people could get out of that thing? We're talking about Jazz at First at the First Unitarian Church, 536 Linton Street in Cincinnati. It's coming up this Sunday, November 19th, 2 o'clock, and you can get tickets now. I would urge you to get them early because this is really an incredible performance. It's a rarity to be able to hear this performance. Tickets available at cincinnatijazz.org. I want to take you back to the mid-'90s for just a moment here. We have Jim Snidero here with us. And, Jim, you're going to be playing with the Phil DeGreg Trio and String Source, the 12-piece orchestra here of some of the top players here in Cincinnati. But you and Phil are very much kindred spirits because he has been in music education for quite some time and has touched so many lives. And I understand that you actually back in, I believe it was 96, looking at some of the biographical information, you really have been very impacting to jazz education as well because you've done these Conception book series, Jazz Conception. Tell us about that.
That's right around the time. 96 is when I wrote this first set of etude books, basically studies in jazz, pieces that are studies in jazz. It was one of the first to make them available to all instruments. So we had different volumes for trumpet, trombone, bass trombone, guitar, you name it, flute, clarinet. And they became pretty much the gold standard in that kind of thing. They're used in schools all over the world. They're translated in 4 languages. And I've written a total of 5 book series, and I'm very proud of. I meet students sometimes, or they're not students anymore, they're professional musicians, really good ones, that tell me, I started off with your book. Oh. And these guys are great professional musicians now. I'm very flattered by that. I'm very proud that I was able to make that contribution by sharing what I knew in music that was accessible and instructive on certain levels. And in fact, as far as Phil DeGreg and I go, we went to college together. So I've known Phil 45 years.
See, I learned something every day. What a great combo that would have been. Did you play together in college a lot?
We did. We did. We were in a group together. So that would be around 1980. So it was at least 43 years ago.
Wow. I believe I actually may have recorded you at another radio station doing a set I think it was at the Blue Wisp, and I think we actually recorded you for a broadcast or did a live broadcast. It was amazing. I even go back with you a little ways there, but not as far back as Phil.
That's long enough.
That's right. I'm thrilled that you're coming back here to Cincinnati, and I know you have been here before and that it's one of your favorite stops because it is a great jazz city. And I want to just make sure we mention the two performances that Jim Snidero is going to be at here. Jazz at First at the First Unitarian Church on Sunday, November 19th. This Sunday, November 19th. And at Snidero and Strings, you're going to want to check this out. I thank Phil DeGreg and Doug Lillibridge for setting us up with Jim here to have him on the air here with us to talk about this. Jazz at First, Snidero and Strings. And prior to that, I just want to make sure we mention as well, because we are dear friends with the Cincinnati Contemporary Jazz Orchestra. And on Thursday, November 16th, at the Redmore on Linwood Avenue, will be alto sax virtuoso Jim Snidero, as we said, here with the Cincinnati Contemporary Jazz Orchestra. You're going to really get your chops worked out here, going between jazz orchestra and strings, huh?
It's a lot of music that I'll be playing in Cincinnati, and I can't wait. I've been going to Cincinnati. As a matter of fact, the first time I played in Cincinnati was 1982, and that was with Brother Jack McDuff in the first version of the Blue Wisp.
Oh, my goodness.
And that's the first time I played in Cincinnati. When I was on the road with Brother Jack McDuff, I did a couple of records with him, too, and we were on our way to Indianapolis, and we played there. And then about 3 or 4 years later, probably around 85 or 86, I started working at the Blue Wisp as a soloist, and I played at all three of the places. It has to be like 30, 40 times total. Right. And my brother actually went to Xavier University, so I had family there. I knew Phil. I used to stay at Phil's place. I had lots of jazz fans that, loved to come and see me play, and got to know a lot of people in Cincinnati. So I go back quite a ways there.
Well, it's a homecoming for Jim Snidero this Sunday, November 19th, First Unitarian Church, and he's going to be accompanied by the Phil DeGreg Trio, which is fantastic as well. That elevates everything even more. And then, as we said, String Source, the 12-piece orchestra with some of the finest among our Cincinnati musicians under the direction of Eric Leckleiter, the CCJO artistic director. So you want to check that out. You can get tickets for either of the performances I've been mentioning, either Sunday, November 19th at the First Unitarian Church. You can get those tickets at cincinnatijazz.org. That is the Cincinnati Contemporary Jazz Orchestra website. They are backing this as well. And also, if you want to check out Jim Snidero with the Cincinnati Contemporary Jazz Orchestra, Thursday, November 16th, right here at the Redmore, a few days before the big Sunday performance. And that's going to be at the Redmore on Linwood Avenue. And again, cincinnatijazz.org. Jim, I'm thrilled that you took some time here with us. I know that you're touring, that you're doing a lot of things. Thank you for all that you've added to education and for all that you're doing here for music and to keep great jazz alive. And like I said, it's like a homecoming, I'm sure, for you to come back to Cincinnati. I have to ask one of the other questions. What does Jim Snidero like to listen to when you're relaxing or when you're looking for a break from other things?
Oh, well, it's hard for me to just listen to music casually without thinking about it in technical terms and musical terms. I listen to Charlie Parker still. I love Charlie Parker. I listen to Bartók. I like Bartók, and just some various kinds of classical music. Sometimes Bill Evans. I think Bill Evans is a good one for me to just relax with. It's a very smooth, I would say. Not to confuse it with smooth jazz. It's just very lyrical is the word I should use. I think I'm like a lot of musicians. We have so much music in our lives all the time that I appreciate silence.
That's true. I can definitely imagine. But for all the times you've heard some of these pieces, do you still find yourself finding a nuance or something that maybe you didn't catch before?
Absolutely. Every time, if I'm really paying attention, there's so much there. For a record like Kind of Blue, a lot of people talk about that record as being by Miles Davis, that that's one of the best of all time, you would have to spend a lot of time listening specifically to each instrument over and over again to really understand just what they're doing. And then when you combine all that together, how it's interacting and flowing, it's a lifelong project, really. And that's one of the beautiful things about music is I still love it to this day. I've been playing the saxophone for 55 years, and I still love it. And I still love music and sharing music with people and helping people understand it when I teach or anything like that.
And there's nothing like experiencing it live because, as I say on just about every interview with any jazz musician, or really any musician, vocalist, whatever, there is a symbiosis between you and the audience. You feed off of each other. You get that reaction when you do something in a solo or just your general arrangement, and they're feeding off of your artistry, but you feel their energy as well.
Absolutely. That's something that you can't really sense on a recording.
Right.
For live recordings, for example, you can't really get a hold of the texture of the feeling, the atmosphere of really hearing the instrument and the feeling that the audience has when there's a stillness there and concentration. And you can't really quite put your finger on it sometimes, but it adds to the concentration and enjoyment of both the audience and the musicians.
Jim Snidero, I want to thank you for taking time here with us. And the quote is, an alto saxophone sound that is one of the richest and purest on the planet, and I have to agree with that. That was from, I think, Stereophile, wrote that. But that is tremendous.
That's right.
Thank you for coming back to Cincinnati, for gracing us again with coming here and performing not one, but two performances. Again, I'll reiterate just in case people didn't have a chance to write this down or get information. Sunday, November 19th will be the Jazz at First, Snidero and Strings at the First Unitarian Church on Linton Street here in Cincinnati. Eric Leckleiter directing a 12-piece orchestra as well behind Jim on that, and the Phil DeGreg Trio there. Oh boy, what a great reunion that is. And then that's on Sunday, November 19th. If you'd also like to check out at the Redmore Thursday, November 16th at 7 p.m., once again, Jim Snidero with the Cincinnati Contemporary Jazz Orchestra. It's all kindred spirits, but two totally different performances and something that you're going to want to check out, one or both. Jim, thank you again. We appreciate your time and your artistry. Thank you.
Thank you, George.
You've been listening to a special edition of Behind the Music here, breaking in on Russ Heltman's time on WMKV and WLHS. Remember that CincinnatiJazz.org is the way to get your tickets.